rich and famous. Hey. On YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to a Friday morning as we see a little bit of a sell-off in the market. And yeah, just a really crazy day on Wall Street yesterday. And I think that I'm not alone in feeling that way just from all the tweets and Twitter and all that stuff. People talking about how it just, first of all, the VIX just refusing to go lower, even with the E-minis were up like 26 points at one point yesterday. And the VIX just refusing to go lower. It's very strange when you've got the market continuing to rally and the VIX not moving lower. It just puts up a red flag. Now, there's a possibility that that it just will crash lower from there at some point, because if you looked at like the realized volatility, how much stuff was moving around, it hasn't been moving around very much. However, that all kind of changed towards the end of the session yesterday when we had sort of a violent move down, which kind of justified all of a sudden the VIX being higher and all of a sudden changed the narrative. So there's many kind of wise traders that will look at the VIX, and when they see the VIX not budge lower, they'll take that as meaning, okay, well, we don't have the green signal that everything's fine and that the market's going to continue to rally if the VIX refuses to budge lower. And that's what we've seen. So obviously, I would be remiss coming in today to not mention all the rioting and craziness that's going on in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. And that's obviously weighing on people's minds a little bit, I would think. Apparently what happened yesterday, which made the market turn south, was it was announced that there were going to be announcements about China today, and that's what drove stuff lower. Right when that announcement came out, stuff moved lower. I just wanted to talk about one tweet. I know, I would say that I have many, I'm kind of identify as a Democrat, and however, the majority of my friends and people surrounding me are mostly Republicans, and I'm sure there's people watching me right now that are Republicans as well. And there was a tweet from the president. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was on Wednesday night, and what it said, it was retweeting this cowboy, and the thing that was retweeted was this cowboy saying the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat. And I just don't think that's productive. It's like, what am I supposed to think as a Democrat when the president's saying the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat? I've talked with some other friends who are Republican who, that's a little bit much. I don't think it brings the country together. There has to be, the president has to be doing more than just trying to shore up his base for re-election. And it's not that I don't understand where that tweet comes from. It comes from trying to kind of signal to the base, but it's just not productive in my viewpoint. That particular notion, and I've defended Alex Jones. I certainly understand also the fact that these things like Twitter, Facebook, whatever, now are so big that they don't really qualify as private companies anymore, and thus it's not that by the letter of law that free speech or the Second Amendment or the freedom of speech attaches to it, but that's like a Freudian slip, the Second Amendment. But I understand that possibly kicking people off of these companies just because the company doesn't want them there is, there's a debate about that sort of thing. However, the president tweeting that the party of half of America should be, dead, doesn't sit right with me. And I would think that most of my Republican friends would agree, at least with that minor point. And the thing is I don't believe that my Republican friends want me dead. But I just think that it gets a little outrageous at times. And I don't know why that particular thing set me off of all the things, but it just kind of did. Anyway, let's get to the VIX, and I've just taken an approach now of just taking risk off for now because I don't get it. I'm not trading well, and it's too stressful for me to have like a big short or a big long on in either direction because I mean, this market, in my mind, could go up 1,000 points or it could go down 1,000 points, and I just can't get any sort of handle on what's. I just don't have any feel for it right now, so I'm just kind of staying small and going to sit on the sidelines today, maybe practice my guitar a little bit. And as I was saying in yesterday's thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting on the sidelines sometimes. You know, when I was working as a market maker, you always had to have positions on. It was just by nature of the fact that you couldn't get out of stuff very easily, that you would have residual positions on for months and months and months, and you just kind of had to live with it. Well, one of the beauties of being on the other side of the equation now as a retail trader is I get to decide what positions I want to have on and not have on. And so I can choose to not have stuff on, and that's a freedom, which I'm choosing to do today. All right, let's go to and take a look at what we got going on here. I had to like reset up my computer because I wanted this video game to fit on the SD drive, and so I had to rearrange everything. What's up, James Knight? Nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a minute. Yeah, I came in long yesterday. The VIX. I mean, I came in long VXX, and I ended up kind of hedging against it, locking in some good edge against it. And then the market was rallying, and I like made the decision to switch it up and go short everything. And then I bailed out of that too. And so just the whole act of like switching my position around just cost me money just getting in and out of it. So now I've got nothing on other than I'm slightly long VXX coming in today, which I guess is better than slightly short. And yeah, it looks like we could move lower. I guess for me, the way I would enter back into a position today is if we did get a big pop, like let's say VXX went to like 37 or 38 or 40 or something like that, then I would be tempted to start building into a short. But I don't want to get chipped up. I got chipped up yesterday, you know, back and forth, losing money, and I don't want to be parted with my cash anymore. So the only way to assure that you're not parted with your cash is to not have risk on. And I think I'm just going to sit on the sidelines for a little bit here. You know, no shame. We'll see what happens. Currently, Dow futures down. Let's take a quick look at the term structure here as we are heading into the day. And it's pretty much flattened out. Once again, yesterday, it's just the stuff just would not break to the downside. Okay, so here's a term structure. Let me get out of the way here. And we see that it's pretty much kind of flattening out a little bit here. As the VIX shifted higher, everything else shifted higher above it. So you see the futures are, we still maintain that separation. There's about a point separation now between the spot and front month, and it's a little bit tighter than it was yesterday as far as both the contango percentage and the separation between the VIX and the futures. And what's happened is the VIX has moved up. The futures have also moved up, but not quite as much. So the shape continues. We continue to be in contango, which is ultimately good for the downside. But just market was really kind of acting very bizarre yesterday. And when it starts acting bizarre, it's like I said, it could be up 1,000 points. It could be down 1,000 points. It's just very hard to call it. And I know there's going to be people who, in hindsight, are going to say, oh, I knew it was going to go A up or B down. And you guys are idiots for not following me. But that's what people say all the time, so I'm over it. Let's take a quick look at news headlines. Another I'm sure this is going to be controversial. Another president tweet was like modified, or like the Twitter put. There was a tweet where Trump said that, where the president said that he was going to be. Well, anyways, this is what they did to the tweet. They put it behind this thing here. It says, this tweet violated the Twitter rules about glorifying violence. However, Twitter has determined that it may be in the public's interest for the tweet to remain accessible. So you actually have to like click this view button if you want to actually see it. And this is getting a lot of controversy right now, this particular one. But I've already been on enough of a soapbox today. So anyways, so that's being talked about all over Twitter, and the Twitterverse is going nuts. And there's a lot of like pictures of rioting and stuff like that. And I guess the guy who got killed by the police, the DA came out and said that he kind of said there's not enough evidence to charge the police. And I think that, I think his bosses were like, hey, hold on a sec there, guy. Don't say stuff that's going to like make them burn down even more stuff. So they kind of, they walked back the statements by the DA a little bit, just saying like, there's not, like they just walked it back a little bit, saying like, you know, we haven't looked at all the evidence yet. We haven't decided yet. So it's kind of where it stands with that. Obviously, it goes without saying that like looting buildings and breaking into targets and stuff is not productive if you're trying to protest. However, you know, there is a double standard with the protesting. Obviously, you see these guys in Detroit, in the governor's, you know, inside where the governor is with assault weapons and stuff like that. And you see people having these huge protests after sports events where they're burning cars and stuff. And anyway, there's obviously big issues in America of race right now, still continuing. And, you know, back in the 70s and back in the time of like the Vietnam War, there was a lot more protests than there is now. So this is nothing really new to the U.S. It's new to this generation, but it's definitely not new to the U.S. And we've got, you know, China's trying to stir the pot here a little bit. You can see. I like to look at this Drudge Report site to find stuff. It is more a conservative site. It's an aggregator, so it pulls news from all kinds of different sources. A CNN news crew was arrested in Minnesota. It's kind of like there was a news crew with a Hispanic guy of CNN, and the Hispanic guy in that part of the crew got arrested, but the white guy who was on the other side didn't get arrested. So that's making big headline news right now. And besides that, nothing's really going on. So we'll see what happens coming into today. The futures over last night were weak. If we look at a chart of the E-mini from last night, we can see, well, this really illustrates here that, you know, we're still very much in an uptrend. So don't get it too twisted just because you hear that the market's acting weak. We are still very much in an uptrend here, right? I mean, we haven't even kind of broken out of this pattern here. So might be much ado about nothing, but for me, it feels like it could be more serious. So I'm risk off right now, just kind of on the sidelines. Let's take a quick look at the NASDAQ, and we'll switch time frames here for a second. I guess I don't need time and sales to like take up half the screen here. I like to look and see what's printing. So this kind of 7-day chart shows us moving sideways in the NASDAQ very much, right? That's a little bit different view than that longer view. This kind of shows us just not being able to kind of break out to the upside here. If we look at the E-minis on a similar time period, looks a little bit more bullish. However, that's kind of ironic because obviously the NASDAQ has been stronger in this situation overall, and is the one that threatens to take out the all-time highs here. If we back up a little bit. So there's the all-time high. So here's really the story with the NASDAQ is, do we blast through the all-time highs? And, you know, it's very confusing in people's minds. Like, why would we be taking out the all-time highs when this big thing has affected the economy? And, you know, regardless of how you feel about the coronavirus and all that stuff, you got to admit that it's hurt the economy being locked down and all that stuff. And yet the market seems to have completely rebounded, and doesn't, you know, it's as if it doesn't affect things at all, and that the market's completely fine and better than ever. And that just doesn't make sense in people's minds. And so that whole you know, kind of confusion is what's set into the market right now, I would think it's sort of creating resistance up here, and it's just confusing to everybody involved. Obviously the E-minis here not as close to taking out the highs, but still on the same kind of trajectory here to taking out the highs. And this is just the whole dilemma in front of people is, why would the market be poised to take out the highs when the economic situation has been demonstrated to be worse than it was before? Many companies have not even given guidance for earnings. Most have lowered their earnings expectations. Many have not given guidance. You know, one of the main ways that people kind of rate the market, or that people judge whether the market is cheap or expensive, is talking about a PE ratio, a price to earnings ratio. And, you know, earnings really drives the markets. We talk about that all the time. And if you look at the PE ratios, because the fact that earnings have been downgraded on most of these issues, some of them they haven't even given guidance, but for the ones they've given guidance, the earnings have been lowered. That makes it makes the PE ratios higher, and by that measure, at least, these stocks relatively more expensive. And we're reaching PE ratios that we haven't seen since the dot-com bubble. And so that is a scary thing, because, you know, if we've gone for so long in the supposition that the market is driven by earnings, and as long as PE ratios are low relative to other times in history, then the market's a buy. Well, the market's rallying and not following those quote-unquote rules that people had attached to the market, in that now, relative to those rules, these stocks are very high priced. And so what do? You just throw out the rules and you just keep buying stuff? And it's not as much of a problem for me, because I've always come in with the stipulation that the market doesn't make any sense regardless, and sort of a delta neutral philosophy. So for my kind of universe of trading, it doesn't matter. But for most other people that are using these numbers to value where they feel the market should be, this is a big problem. All right, well, I'm going to let you get back to it. I hope I haven't offended people with my talk about tweets and all that stuff, but it bugs me. I think it would bug anybody if somebody is targeting you and saying, you know, the only good you would be a dead you. I don't like that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Do you think TVIX will go up? Let me just respond. J-Swiss channel. I don't know. My crystal ball is still in the shop. TVIX, you know, it did go up a little bit yesterday. It was hanging out around just up 3 or 4 points yesterday. Now it's up a little bit more. We've seen the VIX firm up, and obviously the VIX futures have firmed up a little bit more. But once again, one of the reasons I don't have positions on right now is I just don't know what's going to happen. The NASDAQ is looking down 10 points right now, which is very much unchanged. It was right around, you know, up or down 10 points yesterday in the open. For the NASDAQ, you know, plus or minus 50 points just pretty much means unchanged. But, and everything's kind of unchanged right now, but it just, the fact that the VIX went way up, or actually was staying firm yesterday with the market way up, was a red flag. Now with the E-minis down 18, NASDAQ down 14, the VIX being up a point makes sense. That's fairly normal. But yesterday with the market way up and the VIX not going down was a red flag. All right, I hope that helps a little bit. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time, guys and gals.
You're watching Famous Dave.
Good luck today.